Here's a new video based on the requests I received on my YouTube videos, saying that I have to make a video about instinctive shooting. First of all, I suggest the term intuitive instead of instinctive, and I'm going to tell you why I prefer this. Instinctive shooting or intuitive shooting is a method of shooting without consciously aiming. As you see, this is approximately 10-meter distance, and as you might have realized, I canted the bow, so it was literally impossible for me to use any visual reference based on the position of the arrow or the bow.
It's a cold day in Istanbul. It snowed yesterday and in the morning, and it is predicted to have snowfall for the next couple of days. So we are caged on this lovely Sunday at home. So it's a good occasion to make the video for intuitive shooting or instinctive shooting with the better known or common name. So it is a sort of shooting without consciously aiming, which is also called point shooting in firearm shooting. But in the terminology of archery, it is usually known as instinctive shooting. But I prefer to use intuitive instead of instinctive, just because intuition is based on deduction, so there should be a base from which you deduct. So there should be something your acts or your thinking are based on. So that's why this type of aiming should be called intuitive instead of instinctive, because it's based on something that you pre-acquired, some know-how or some motor memory. In an instinct, on the other hand, there's no pre-learned know-how. For example, a bird that makes its nest did not or does not learn it from the parents. Although the mental mechanisms are quite complex, it is also so natural, so not too much different than throwing a ball. Imagine a basketball player, for example. He or she doesn't have any rear sight or front sight to aim by viewing the target through these. So it is just the acquired motor memory by repeated motions for hours, weeks, months, and even years. So when I said that it is natural, I have to also say that it is not to be underestimated, although it is not to be overestimated too. It's natural, but requires a lot of practice, like in anything that we do or we have been doing since our childhood in developing complex motor skills. Think about typing, walking, running, riding a bicycle. All these took a lot of practice, and then the subconscious mind somehow took it over and use its mysterious mechanisms to make us do everything right. If it comes to aiming with any weapon, there are actually two options. One of them is using both sides of a gun, the rear side and the front side, and having a plane, a two-dimensional sight picture on which you intercept the line of aim through your eye, the rear side and the front side. In a shotgun like this, usually if it's not a slug gun, two sights do not exist. In fact, there's only a front sight, and because these guns were meant to shoot at moving targets, at birds or at rabbits, the shooter keeps both eyes open like this to be able to perceive the three-dimensional location of the target. It's the same in instinctive shooting, because we know that in the earlier stages of Turkic history, the warfare and hunting was based on horseback fighting, and the distance between the archer and the target was changing all the time. So it was very important to perceive the depth of the image that you're looking at. İlk tur bir kalibrasyon için ihtiyacım olur.
Wow. Super.
In English, actually, there are two terms, to point and to aim, which is missing in Turkish. We use just one term for both. But pointing refers to shooting by keeping both eyes open, but there's still a reference here on a shotgun, a front sight. But because of the lack of the rear sight, it is actually a pointing, but without the aiming is performed without using a sight picture on a plane or a two-dimensional environment. You perceive the three-dimensional position. On the other hand, if you use a rifle or any other weapon with rifle barrel, take a pistol, for example. Here, there's a rear sight and the front sight, and the line of aim is an imaginary line going through my eye, the rear sight, front sight, and the target. And if I have a cross dominance, for example, if my dominant eye is not that eye, which is also on the side of my dominant hand, then I can even close this eye and use this two-dimensional sight picture to aim. But of course, if it comes shooting at moving targets, or if it comes to shooting fast, then it is not a very convenient method. But of course, it works. Even in bow shooting, it works. And in Olympic modern sport shooting of archery, these kind of aiming methods are used. Back to the shotgun, if you use the front sight only, and even if you keep both of your eyes open, there is a reference on your weapon. But in intuitive shooting with a bow, you mustn't use any reference on your weapon because it's not intuitive anymore. There are other aiming methods like split vision, for example, in which you use a reference on your bow or your arrow or whatever. But in intuitive shooting, you really literally don't care anything on your bow and arrow. So that's why it would be possible to shoot even in dark, as you don't need any reference.
This is 32 centimeter diameter disc or something like that, and as you see, the distance is 20 meters, by the way, and the visibility was really low, so you can shoot that way just because you don't use any visual references consciously, especially visual references on the bow or arrow. So you have to insist in not focusing on any part of your bow or arrow when practicing intuitive shooting, and shooting in the dark is quite a good practice to evaluate your skills, to hone your skills, and to enhance your ability to shoot without looking at your weapon. The question is how we acquire this motor memory. So in the old archery treatises in the Eastern world, especially that of Memluk and Ottoman, it's clearly said that the beginning of the training is the daily pulling exercises performed with a bow called kepaze. Kepaze is still a word that we use in modern Turkish, but of course the meaning changed slightly. But this refers to a bow that is much weaker than the bow that you will be shooting in shooting actually. Kepaze or kepade bows are meant to practice the pulling. So it is not for shooting, but to acquire the muscle memory that is required for pulling the bow properly. So for that purpose, there were weaker bows, which is clearly mentioned in old archery treatises. They should be weak. These weaker bows are meant to help acquire this muscle memory with repeating pulling exercises. It was a daily exercise that we still recommend or advise our trainees and ask them to do. And the reason is archery is quite unique. Well, maybe there are similarities with other sportive activities. Some muscle groups that are acting towards some direction should be kept tense, while some other muscle groups acting to the same direction should be kept relaxed. So this is quite important and not easy to acquire. That's why a lighter bow is helpful to really understand this mechanism and this configuration of the muscles. And after mastering this pulling stage, let's say, because it is the first stage of the shooting technique, then you have to acquire another muscle memory or motor memory, which is the release as well as handling of the grip. So these two technical skills are acquired during torba or sandık training, which is shooting at a target from a very close distance. It's not only about learning and mastering the bow hands and the string hands movements, but also this is the first step into intuitive shooting, just because there is actually something that you focus on this very close target.
Yok böyle değil. Sen sarsılmanın böyle sponsorluğu falan sponsor değil mi?
Buradan kaçınca And here, if you do not focus on anything on your bow or arrow, which would lead you to some sort of conscious aiming, if you don't do that, you learn actually how to make your arrows fly downrange in an intuitive way, so without a conscious interception of all these elements like the bow, the string, the arrow, and the target. The next step is increasing the target distance gradually. So put the target at 5 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters, and try to have a similar accuracy that you had in shorter distances. And you will find out that there are some limitations, and like any other technique, intuitive shooting has its advantages as well as disadvantages and limitations. So it takes much more less time than any other technique in which you use conscious effort for aiming. The intuitive shooting takes a very short time, and it is very effective in shorter distances, and if we are talking about combat accuracies. And consider this: in the historical times, hitting someone anywhere in the body with an arrow would have been a fatal wound, just because of the lack of asepsy, antisepsy, antibiotics, and all these kind of medical support. So an injured or a wounded enemy sometimes died in a few days because of anaerobic infections. So the bow was not meant to be that accurate. For example, that is expected from a modern bow now. So you didn't have to hit the enemy in a vital zone. Of course, it was an advantage too, just to kill the enemy instantly, or it was actually much more important in hunting, because they needed to stop the animal on track. But otherwise, it was a very effective weapon of war, just because the wounds were prone to get infected, and very difficult to treat at that time. So there is a combat accuracy, and within this combat accuracy, the limitations are quite acceptable for intuitive shooting. But after a certain distance, you will need to use another technique that would increase the accuracy, so a sort of conscious aiming method. A few more words about the advantages of the intuitive shooting technique. In archery, reproducibility is very important. It means that each and every shot has to have the same mechanics, which means that your body form, the position of your limbs, your draw length, all should be the same in the previous shot and the next shot. Because the bow is a very complex machine that transforms the human muscle energy to usable kinetic energies. So that's why the basics are very important, and the reproducibility of these basics is very important. But in instinctive shooting or intuitive shooting, if it comes to shooting targets from a close distance and from a horseback on move, or when the target is moving, then you may be in such a situation that you have to modify these fundamentals. For example, instead of holding the bow vertically, you have to cant it a little bit. Instead of coming your regular anchor point, you have to modify it by lowering it a little bit, or maybe drawing a little bit less. Okay. These all are possible actually in intuitive shooting if you use or if you stick on some fundamentals, like for example using your back muscles and the bones on your back properly as it should be in every and each anchoring. So let me give you an example. In some Japanese martial arts, there is a teaching method called kata. So kata is a Japanese verb referring to form. So this form includes or contains the fundamentals of a given technique, which is actually not used that way in a real combat. Let me give you an example. For example, a very well-known karate punch is like that. So the punch is a direct punch, while the other hand is taken back like that. But in a real combat, if you punch like that, then your face is unprotected, and at the same time the opponent can hit your face. So nobody actually punches like that. The martial artists usually punch like that while still protecting their face and their body by using the other hand for guarding. This is the same with archery. When you're learning it, stick on the fundamentals. Go to the same anchor point, hold the bow exactly as it should be. Even the grip on the bow's grip is very important. But if it comes to a certain level on which you really mastered all the fundamentals and really understand the mechanics of that, then you will see that your subconscious mind even calculates all these modifications and variations at the very moment you shoot, and you see that you're going to be still accurate enough, like a magic.
Yani bize öğretilen var. Yani kendimi rahat hissetmiyorum.